I've had a bit of a change of heart regarding the PvP-PvE debate. I've always been staunchly against the idea of separating the two and, in the past, held a very antagonistic view toward PvE-only players. But after happily, and without regret, participating in the ongoing Care Bear genocide that started this year with the Align and Mine event, and continues with the 4.2 Stormbreaker event, I now see the value in distinguishing these two types of players. Star Citizen is a game that should appeal to as many people as possible. I'd argue that, with nearly a $1 billion budget, it cannot afford to be a niche product with limited appeal. After all, a PvE player's money is just as valuable as a PvP player's money, and I think CIG needs the combined support of both groups to keep its services running. So in this video, we are going to discuss all of this and see if we can identify the problems and find some solutions. And those solutions may be a little bit more nuanced than simply saying, add a PvE slider or add PvE-only servers. The PvP-PvE divide in Star Citizen isn't just a matter of player preference. It's a fundamental design flaw that's actively harming the game. CIG could fix this if they stopped trying to build a life simulator and instead focused on making an actual game. Almost every issue in Star Citizen could be resolved with straightforward, unrealistic solutions, yet the obsession with realism is dragging down the entire experience. A good game is sacrificed on the altar of realism. And for what? Nothing meaningful, just constant frustration. Despite all of this, one solution could clear up much of the chaos, and that solution is real, meaningful factions. With a proper faction system, there would be patrols, police forces, territorial control, and genuine consequences for stepping into the wrong zone. If a player decides to sneak into enemy PvE space, that's fine, but it should be dangerous. The player wouldn't have access to safe spawn points, and local patrols would swiftly eliminate the intruder. Alternatively, a player could choose to go full outlaw. No allies, no safe harbors, hunted everywhere by all factions. A valid playstyle in its own right. However, Star Citizen currently lacks that kind of risk-reward balance. Without a system that delivers real impact and consequence, the whole structure falls apart. The weak deterrents CIG relies on, such as crime stat and comm arrays, simply do not work. Real solutions were developed decades ago in games like Dark Age of Camelot and PlanetSide 1. In Dark Age of Camelot, you had 3 factions, and you couldn't harm your own faction because friendly fire simply did not exist. In PlanetSide, you also had 3 factions, and friendly fire was technically possible, but a robust grief system penalized abusers. That's how trust and accountability were built. Star Citizen desperately needs a middle ground between these two models, not the Eve model. I don't care about realism. I care about gameplay. Systems that prevent players from directly harming members of their own faction aren't just acceptable, they're necessary. If players can't trust their faction, then what's the point of having one? You get the chaos that you have right now in the game, where nobody trusts anybody. Of course, edge cases will always exist. Players might block landing pads, ram ships, or engage in general griefing behavior. True griefing behavior. However, at least a proper faction system would lay a foundation that discourages such behavior, instead of inadvertently enabling it. And if griefing were still to occur, CIG could very easily punish the offenders and ban them. All this so-called griefing stems from CIG's forced factionless system, and it simply does not work. They are trying to impose structure where none exists. The game needs factions. Without them, nothing works. Look at the game as it is right now to see that. Let me give you an example. I logged in recently to check missions for those PAF sites. I was bored and I thought it might be fun, just, to go check them out. Until I checked the time and remembered that I was solo, nobody else was on. Very likely I would have been ambushed by a group of players camping that site. A variety of things might have happened. So, instead of wasting my time and going over there and probably being attacked by a guy hiding in a corner, or tricked by some guy pretending to be friendly, I logged out and jumped into Arena Commander, where I know who my friends and foes are. I'm not the only one thinking this way. Most players probably just quit and play something else. They don't just play another part of Star Citizen. Entire sections of content are being ignored because players don't feel safe engaging with those parts of content. This is still a game in testing, and players aren't testing content because they're tired of being attacked. Look at how the Stormbreaker PTU testing went. It was a disaster. To make matters worse, CIG removes consequences. Look at how they've reduced the jail time recently. That's even if players do go to jail, because players may not even end up getting crime stat because they can simply disable the comm array and commit crimes with zero punishment. If they do get caught and sent to jail, they just eliminate some NPCs, hand in a large amount of ore, and be back in 10 or so minutes. Or they can log into an alternate account and transfer prison merits to their main account, completely bypassing any real penalty. There are no genuine stakes or accountability for attacking players and killing them in the verse. Not at all. The game also blurs the line between players and NPCs. It's often impossible to tell who's who. That little red chevron isn't part of your mission or an AI opponent. It signifies a real player, a threat. Yet the game conceals that fact, making it easier for griefers and harder for everyone else to assess danger. A very good and relevant recent example of that would be the Hunt the Polaris event, where players were constantly going red and nobody knew who friend and foe was, and then the real foe would come out and just start ganking players. People thought they were being attacked by NPCs, nobody knew what was going on, and that chaos is an excellent example of what happens when you have a factionless system yet try to get people to work together. All of this ruins social gameplay. You never really know who is around you. You're constantly paranoid. You never feel safe. You can't simply log in, run missions with a friend, or test systems without having to watch your back every step of the way. Speaking of testing, remember how I mentioned the 4.2 PTU? That's an official testing ground, and all it did was become a PvP murderfest. I enjoyed it. Others, rightfully so, did not. Dark Age of Camelot and Warhammer Online got this balance right. PvE zones were safe, while PvP zones were separate. A player could enjoy the entire game while avoiding PvP if they wished. But if they wanted to fight, there were battlegrounds, RVR lakes, and clear objectives. The best part was that even PvE players had a reason to care about PvP. Take Darkness Falls from Daok, for example, a dungeon full of rewards that was only accessible if your faction was winning the PvP fight, because it mattered. It provided tangible benefits. It was a great system, offering high risk and high reward, while also helping to balance factions. If one faction dominated for too long, they'd get distracted farming loot in the dungeon, giving the other factions a chance to regroup and push back. Now compare that to Star Citizen. Constant open PvP. There are no safe zones, no structured factions, and no clear incentives. Only a perpetual threat. Frankly, Star Citizen seems to be chasing the EVE Online model. But the EVE Online model isn't enjoyable. It's essentially a spreadsheet simulator where most players sit docked with 10 alternate accounts, waiting. It encourages high paranoia, low trust gameplay, and only appeals to a very small niche. Star Citizen cannot afford to be a niche game. It needs a broader player base. That means learning from games that understood this PvP-PvE divide. Games that respected both playstyles and built systems allowing them to coexist. Until that happens, the constant gankfest is not only annoying, it's downright destructive. For many PvE-focused players, the idea of willingly participating in PvP combat is like getting a Democrat to vote for a Republican. It's ideological, something these players feel very strongly about. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm the same way about co-op PvE games. I have absolutely zero interest in slaughtering AI with friends, even if the game is well made. It's just not my thing. I only do PvP. But there's this idea, this notion, that if you make your game PvA, which I think stands for player versus anything, players will interact with all of the systems and mechanics you've built. And that's only half true. You'll often get PvP players to engage with PvE content, but you'll almost never get PvE players to engage with PvP. The best you can hope for is that they begrudgingly venture into contested areas, praying that no one's around to ruin their plans. Unfortunately for them, someone is almost always around, ready to gank those hopeless souls. And that's really what they are. Hopeless. Not just because they're bad, and despite what even some CIG developers say, they're not lazy cowards. They simply don't want to interact with the absolutely garbage PvP Star Citizen currently offers. I could do an entire video on why Star Citizen PvP is terrible, and maybe I will someday. But to stay on topic, here are just a few reasons why the average PvE player is unlikely to ever fully participate in this game's PvP side of the PvA concept. Number 1, imbalance. There are over 200 ships in Star Citizen, and the majority are completely unsuited for PvP. Consider a PvE player piloting a generalist ship like the Freelancer, or, God forbid, one of the industrial vessels. How are they supposed to face off against a PvP player in an F-7A Hornet? The cliched answer is hire an escort, but the reality is that no one does. The game offers little support for social coordination, leaving these players to get blown up without a chance. When players feel they're doomed from the start, they simply stop trying. Number 2. Low Trust Society. Star Citizen has essentially become a factionless, free-for-all deathmatch, where nearly everyone you encounter is likely your enemy. If not immediately, then eventually. The game has devolved into what I call Rust in Space, or simply Starkov, and it's being played accordingly. Every encounter turns into a Mexican standoff, with both sides hesitating over who will draw first. That's not engaging gameplay. It's paranoia wrapped in tedium. Number 3. The victim risks everything. The aggressor risks nothing. Anti-item recovery zealots love to claim that this is a reason to scrap recovery altogether. They even try to win PvE players over by arguing that ganking is worse now because PvPers don't lose their gear. But anyone with common sense sees through that nonsense. Before item recovery, those same PvPers were flying meta ships while wearing hospital gowns to avoid any meaningful loss. They craved free kills and salt, not genuine consequences. Let's cut that bad faith argument down once and for all. Even now, the aggressor risks almost nothing. Even if they somehow lose, usually only due to incompetence, they've sacrificed just 5 minutes and a gladius. Meanwhile, the PvE player that they just took out was piloting a C2 loaded with full cargo, rare loot, and, most importantly, countless hours of effort. That ship might represent hours of painstaking work. With zero chance of fighting back, they end up losing everything. Number 4. The PvP in Star Citizen is incomprehensibly bad. In most games, even if you rarely engage in PvP, you still grasp the basics and can put up a fight, because those games are designed with PvE players in mind when they encounter PvP situations. Star Citizen, however, isn't like that. It's a janky mess where being good means exploiting a long list of gimmicks. Remember tricording and 45-degree turns and flying from the old flight model? Things are better with master modes, but now it's just more about slow rolling and pip wiggling in order to throw off the game's built-in auto-aim. Even its FPS combat is laden with exploits, like spamming med pens, or it used to be wearing light armor with a heavy core and spamming A and D to strafe and warp your character around. Or most recently, it was all about taking the Karna rifle and exploiting the charge shot mechanic for extra firepower. It was all very silly. Star Citizen's PvP is merely one gimmick after another. The only way to learn these gimmicks is to dive into the deprecated, abandoned Arena Commander mode and get stomped by unemployed sweatlords for hundreds of hours, or hope someone takes pity on you and decides to teach you. Or worse, you can pay some scumbag grifter real money for quote-unquote coaching sessions, only to still probably get wrecked. But hey, maybe now you'll understand why. Another reason Star Citizen PvP sucks is that it heavily favors players with peripherals. How many new players, most coming from an MMO or shooter background on PC, are really going to invest hundreds of dollars in extra gear solely to play this game? Especially when they have no interest in flight sims and other space or flight games that don't even require such peripherals to compete in PvP. Arguably, the only aspect of Star Citizen that demands peripherals is its PvP. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. Playing PvP with just a mouse and keyboard is unreasonably challenging and puts you at a strict disadvantage against someone using peripherals. Even those who claim to be pure mouse and keyboard players often resort to head tracking or pedals, especially pedals, since, for some reason, analog rolling is considered the most important skill in this game's PvP, and you simply cannot roll very well on a mouse and keyboard. Star Citizen PvP isn't hard, it's just bad. Badly presented, poorly designed, and full of broken mechanics that reward degenerate behavior. Being good simply means learning how to break the game more efficiently than the next guy. So, is it any wonder that PvE players look at all of this and say, nah, I'm good? As someone who's skilled at Star Citizen PvP, as one of those sweaty players, I'll say it plainly. Star Citizen PvP absolutely sucks. And the only people still engaging in it are either clinging to the hope that one day it'll improve, or they're just happy being the kings of Garbage Mountain. Maybe I went off on a tangent toward the end there, but these are just some of the reasons why PvE players won't engage with PvP. The barrier to entry is simply too high and uncomfortable on way too many fronts. For every single problem in Star Citizen, there's always someone who says, well, you just have to wait for X feature to address Y problem. That line of thinking is precisely why, over a decade later, we have the mess that we have right now. The idea that reputation is going to solve anything is childish at best. Why would it? The most obvious reason it won't fix anything is that everyone and their mother has an alt. Why would I care if my alt ends up in jail for a week and gets blacklisted from all groups for a month? I wouldn't. It's just an alt. Reputation doesn't prevent bad actions in the first place. It only kicks in after the fact. So what actually deters the aggressor? Nothing. No system is going to stop me from going after someone I really want to target. And that reputation hit? It's well worth it if I get to record myself destroying someone and post it on YouTube, even if I'm not using an alt. The entire logic behind expecting players to behave because of a reputation system exposes how little people understand human nature in online games. Another reason reputation won't work in Star Citizen is that the players wield destructive power in this game that would be reserved for demigods in other MMO games, from mini-nukes to railgun-armed capital ships. The firepower available in Star Citizen is absurd compared to other games. Again, the system is flawed on both a conceptual and logical level. Any chance of reputation being a viable solution vanished the moment this game became a combined arms MMO FPS. And like it or not, that is what this game is. Just not a very good one. There's an idea that if the NPC response to ganking were fast and brutal enough, players would think twice before killing another player. Well, I'm here to tell you, again, that idea is both wrong and stupid. Remember when I said players in Star Citizen wield demigod-like powers? That, along with the fact that everyone has an ult, still applies. You could give NPC security forces a 2-second response time. But what exactly is that going to do to stop an ult in an eclipse from one-shotting a fully loaded Hull C? What's that rapid response going to do to stop some loser with a sniper rifle from headshotting a guy standing still at a kiosk terminal while he loads up his C2? Or how about somebody just coming along and dropping an A2 bomb on some parade? None of these issues are being prevented. They're only dealt with, very poorly, mind you, after the fact. That's not deterrence, that's cleanup. This bad idea, like so many others, comes straight from Eve. Eve is, again, an antiquated 2004 spreadsheet simulator masquerading as an MMO, populated by schizophrenics and bots. Meanwhile, Star Citizen is a 2025 tech demo masquerading as an MMO FPS, also probably populated by schizophrenics. The only things these two games have in common are spaceships and the schizophrenics who are flying them. That's it. Start looking to better games for solutions, because Eve ain't it. PvE servers are the most effective solution for ending this whole debate. They would, without a doubt, stop all the complaining and solve every problem for players who don't want to interact with PvP in any way. But at what cost? This is not the best solution for this game. Separating the player base and removing PvE players from the game's ecosystem isn't the way to go. Ideally, for an MMO to stand out as something more than World of Warcraft slop, you need a game where players care about what's going on, whether it's PvE or PvP. Splitting the player base into two distinct rule sets not only divides, rather than unites it, but it also leaves key parts of your living, breathing world completely void and empty. The goal is to make both types of players care about what's happening, even if that care is subconscious. You can't have people truly invested in the world if the player base is split across separate server rule sets. At the same time, though, you can't let PvE players get hopelessly slaughtered like little piggies. The best way to make both camps happy, while maintaining the game's integrity, is to ensure that all PvP is consensual by designing systems or planets where PvP is expected. Players will complain a lot less when they know there's a good chance the area they're heading into is contested. As comical as it might sound to say we don't have enough systems for that yet, this late in development, it's still true. We don't. But I want to present an example solution to better get across the methodology and thought process behind how this might work. Number one, the PvE system, think Terra, etc. In this system, engaging other players is strictly forbidden. If you aim your weapons at another player's ship, your firing mechanism is disabled. You simply can't damage them in any way, shape, or form. It's not a stretch to assume that the UEE controls ship computers and fire control systems in this universe while in its space. And the same could apply to small arms when on foot. Number 2, the PvA System. Think Stanton, but with some modifications. This system would function, like I said, similarly to Stanton, with one key difference. Planets and safe areas would have comm arrays that restrict weapons by enforcing a lock, just as in the PvE system. However, there would be regions in the system without comm arrays. That's where PvP could occur. These hotspots might hold high-value rewards, valuable cargo, rare materials, and so on, attracting PvP players precisely for that reason. Outside those areas, the system remains largely safe for everyone. Number 3, the PvP system. Think Pyro or Nyx or something like that. This would be a system where PvP is everywhere, with a few very limited exceptions, such as certain stations. Ideally, this system would also be faction-based, with orgs helping factions fight for control and contest territories. Basically, what Pyro was meant to be, or at least what people thought it would be. By implementing a system like this, you get all of the benefits of PvE servers without splitting the player base. You preserve a shared universe while respecting different playstyles. Now, I know someone's going to hear all of this and say something like, they want to go to every area, the PvP area, and not be restricted or worry about being attacked. Listen, you, as a PvE player, are going to get the lion's share of content in this game. You always do. And honestly, you probably should. Like I said earlier, your dollar is just as valuable as mine. And it's true. But PvP players, we will settle for a lot less. So you've got to give us just a little bit of something that we can call our own. We're happy with our little slice of dangerous space, fighting and skirmishing. PvE players are welcome to come visit. Just don't expect it to be safe. A lot of the PvP in Star Citizen is just bored players chasing others to farm salt. Nothing in the game truly matters, and only a smooth-brained simian would blame item recovery for that. In reality, item recovery is the best change this game has seen in a long time. But even before item recovery, nothing really mattered anyway. If you want PvP players to steer clear of PvE players, you have to give them something to do and somewhere to go. Somewhere they know they'll encounter PvP. That place needs to be designed specifically for PvP, complete with respawn mechanics that make sense and promote dynamic action. Contested Zones attempted this, but let's be honest, the PvP they promote is both boring and unsatisfying. Looter shooters are old hat, and thankfully, are on their way out. After all, most people playing Star Citizen aren't here to experience a subpar version of a game like Escape from Tarkov. But if players had something interesting, dynamic, and accessible, say a planet that revives the gone but not forgotten theaters of war, set in the persistent universe, I'm sure the majority of PvP-focused players would happily go there and duke it out using combined arms warfare. For land, for power, forever. But that's not the case. So what do we do instead? We take our terrible Star Citizen PvP deathmatch out to the rest of the verse and annihilate all of the hopeless PvE players, all while mockingly telling them to hire an escort as if their concerns aren't valid. But their concerns are valid. It's not good for the game, and something has to change. You may say that I am part of that problem, and you would be right, but I still won't stop ganking hopeless PvE players. But what I will do is voice my concerns to CIG and tell them that something has to change, or else this product is going to suffer in the long run. I've had a pretty significant change of heart. I can admit when I'm wrong, and I was mistaken in the past about the notion that the game didn't need a separation of PvP and PvE. That doesn't mean I now advocate for PvE servers or a PvE slider, nor does it mean I'll stop ganking PvE players. Believe it or not, I'm on their side. However, I'm just playing the game the way CIG right now intends for it to be played, even if that approach is flawed, which it is. The responsibility lies with them to fix the game and make it better for everyone, not for me to ignore these issues by avoiding them. Ultimately, I want consensual PvP, and I want CIG to deliver systems for truly good, meaningful, consensual PvP in the verse, not the god-awful Arena Commander module. Please, for the love of God, just shut that thing down already. Another realization I've had is that Star Citizen now, more than ever, needs a robust faction system. It's the only way to make the game accessible to a broader audience and, fundamentally, a more engaging experience for everyone. This endless free-for-all PvP has grown stale fast, and unless something changes, I don't see a bright future for the game. Remember, this video, it's only my opinion, but I don't make these videos to play it safe or fence it, even though that does generate more views. I know that I'm bound to upset some people along the way, but I ask that you respect my perspective, just as I will respect your right to disagree with it. In the end, we all want Star Citizen to be good, and sometimes supporting systems we may not fully agree with is necessary if it benefits the product as a whole. Because without new players, we don't have a game. And if we don't have a game, we don't have Star Citizen.